Robert, private detective, had just traveled thousands of kilometers from Montreal to reach this remote middle-of-nowhere area, situated near the far northern Lake Atamipek. Granted, this was a great distance to cover for a sole client, but word had it that he was a particularly wealthy one. Carl had to drive a bit further north in order to meet with wealthy industrialist William Hamilton. Hamilton was a prosperous owner who had acquired various businesses as well as metal mines in this northern region. Carl, ever diligent in his work, always carried his log on him, in which he scribbled down thoughts and leads alike during the course of his investigations. Hamilton is waiting for Carl in the general store. It was time for him to get down to business. Hamilton never mentioned a road-blocking barrier. Why was it needed here in the back of Beyond? That would, however, be a mystery for another day. Carl had waited long enough for someone to come and raise it. Carl had a lot on his plate. He had to get back on the road. Hamilton no doubt knew who managed the barrier. Carl wanted to give him a call, but that would have been too easy though, as sure enough the line was acting up. The journey ahead was calling. The case won't close itself. Emperor Duplessis, in spite of his conservative agenda, did a good job in colonizing the rural north, which helped to re-establish the region as an integral part of the province of Quebec. The blue fleur-de-lis could be seen fluttering in the wind here and there, taunting the red Canadian flags on the other side of the province's boundaries. The Polaroid, Carl's long-standing and faithful ally, had seen its share of husbands caught red-handed cheating. There's always something out there waiting to be snapped away, even when removed from civilization. The cutters made quick work of the chain. What better way to investigate vandals than to get into their shoes, Carl, the professional vandal, thought, reveling in the irony of the situation. William Hamilton enjoyed a lavish country house built in the very heart of the northern forests, not too far from here. The local populace was divided when it came to the affluent men. Some saw a wealthy philanthropist dedicated to improving the region's economy. Others an aging Englishman who would do anything to further his fortunes. And those ones hated him enough to go on about scheming against him. Carl was not made aware that winter would come early this year. The North made clear who was the boss up there. Snow, which didn't care much about the date when it felt like dumping its first load of the year. Hamilton had recently acquired a few local businesses, but the last straw was the reopening of a mine, which gave rise to a wave of protests and threats from the Cree people. Circumstances, Carl reckoned that a good number of people must be feeling compelled to oppose Hamilton in one way or another. So far, only the industrialist's house had been a target, but soon enough, Carl thought, the target would become the man himself. Spanning several hectares of virgin forest blanketed in eternal snow. The Manistan region, comprised mostly of bellowing caribous and inviolate lakes, wasn't exactly touristic. It was said that the land had harbored the Cree people for thousands of years, but since the Industrial Revolution, it seemed that all they harbored were metal mines. Very few souls claimed the territory surrounding Lake Atamipek. It could hardly be called a village, an enclave, or a settlement, perhaps. Anything that illustrates middle of nowhereness, bordering the backwoods of the Cree Kingdom. The truck was running on fumes. Good thing that the general store was close by. Since 1941, the general store provided the populace with various goods that couldn't be plucked from nature itself. William Hamilton had recently taken over the place. In fact, the whole region was now his. A milkman had to drive by every week to fill the bottles. The fresh milk indicated a recent visit. An explosion suddenly occurred outside. The transformer had gone up in flames, snapping that wire in the process. Carl figured he would have to wait for an electrician to ride a unicorn through the wilderness to come and repair it. Gilles Lachance, Carl recollected, was the general store's manager. Should Hamilton not be available, he was the man to talk to. Or what if Hamilton had moved up his appointment with his physician? The snowstorm pummeled everything in its path. Carl was not surprised when he heard no tone. You don't leave ammunition out in the open like this. Was Gilles Lachance that careless? Finding a key is easy. Finding the right keyhole, not so much. The note explained that the garage and the store couldn't be supplied with electricity at the same time. By all appearances, the general store also served as a post office. Letters and packages awaited the locals' daily visit. According to that log, it seemed like the whole village owed some money to the general store. Carl was far more interested in the bunch of nearby addresses he had just gotten his hands on, though. Carl was no electrician, but he could identify a wiring problem when he saw one. Hate was in the air. Seems like some villagers barely tolerated each other. Staring intently at the controls won't be enough to make that lift budge. The poor thing was out of power. At long last, the crowbar was within Carl's grasp. Surely it would come in handy at some point. Jumping from that height was akin to tempting death. Perhaps that man on the snowmobile had seen enough of this world already. Amateur hunters showing some pride at having killed a nice pelted beast. With men like this roaming the area, wolves would become extinct within 10 years, Carl thought. Carl wondered what the hell could that thing be. It looked like a man fossilized in ice. All of a sudden, Carl felt like he was pulled inside a world of dreams, a cold, unknown dimension. Somehow, self-control was slipping from his grasp. To all appearances, this was a hunting log. Better yet, a war diary. What could these engraved numbers mean? A fresh path suddenly appeared before Carl. The vision slowly faded away, like an icicle melting in the palm of your hand. Carl, back in the real world, now knew who the icebound man was. Gilles Lachance, the general store's manager himself. That had to be the worst parking job ever. Who was Carl to judge, though? It may be customary to park like that around these parts. Or not. Given the circumstances, leaving with an empty tank would be a death warrant. Carl had to refuel. There should be a law forbidding doctors from falling sick. Finding a locked door in the country is not that big of a deal. Carl knew a key had to be hidden nearby. In spite of Dr. Beaupre's goodwill, the place didn't look much like a physician's office. It could easily be mistaken for a sewing shop. Only a great misfortune could have pushed a man like Dr. Beaupre to isolate himself from the world, far up north and buried in snow. Carl got the trembles as he imagined the excruciating pain that kind of scalpel could no doubt inflict. Within these miserable walls, patients probably felt more like in a slaughterhouse than in a doctor's office. A chamber pot. Fortunately for Carl, inspecting it wouldn't further this particular investigation. It couldn't get any more makeshift than this, Carl thought, astonished. Everything was improvised, including the examining table. Who could really lie on this and expect a happy ending? Dr. Beaupre had done his medical studies quite far from here. He was surely one of the first students out of the new campus to settle on the mountainside. To hell with patient confidentiality. Carl wouldn't be able to track down his client without unveiling secrets. Now he knew where to find Hamilton. The good doctor, flanked by his beautiful spouse. Pure happiness, captured on cardstock. The track was fresh. That meant the car sunk down just a little while ago. Now where the hell could the passengers possibly have gone? Someone must have dropped this in a hurry, but whoever did was heading into the woods. Carl's tracking instincts were quickly kicking in. Carl knew why he was suddenly shivering. He was going back to the realm of visions. Carl had no issue recognizing the spirit-like figures, but he couldn't figure out what they wanted from him. The phantom, freed of reality's shackles, vanished in the forest. Earlier, Carl had witnessed a tragedy that befell it. Carl sensed that the cold was beating a retreat, as if he was moving away from some kind of center of gravity.